Hello and welcome to another episode of Fully Charged. Now, I am very excited about this episode and I hope you find it as fascinating as I did when I had an amazing discussion with Dr. Brian Gu. Now, he is the Vice Chairman and President of Xpeng Motors in China. This is a 6-year-old company. They're already producing a car very successfully. They've sold over 16,000 of them. Have you heard of Xpeng? No. Well, you might have done. If you have, then you're better informed than I have. I really hadn't heard of them until fairly recently. They're just about to launch a new car. Today, it gets launched. Very exciting. So this is really one of the first times there's been any news outlet that outside China that knows about this car. Dr. Gu worked as a banker in America. Well, he was born and raised in China. He grew up in Hong Kong. He was educated in America. He worked in America for a long time for various big banks. And eventually, he saw the potential and the future of electric vehicles and how exciting they were. And he got involved with Xpeng Motors a few years ago, and he's clearly loving it. It's just wonderful. He really enjoys what he's doing. I can't wait for you to see it. Here we go. This is Dr. Brian Gu on Fully Charged. So Brian, thank you so much for joining us. And this is a really exciting moment for the show, for Fully Charged, because you're basically our first Chinese guest on the show. And, what you're doing is incredibly relevant to Fully Charged. It's very, very exciting to find out what you're doing. A lot of the focus, certainly in Europe, in terms of electric car adoption is on Norway. Everyone talks about Norway, and Norway's got more electric cars and they've got so many chargers and all this stuff. And we often forget that actually the country that's far and away ahead of anyone else on the planet is China. And that transition has been incredible. But I mean, in a way, what I would love you to do is just give us a brief sort of potted history of the speed of the Industrial Revolution in China, because that is, in historical terms, it is unbelievable. Because that would have been in your lifetime. When you were a child, it would have been a very different place.
Yeah, I think first of all, Robert, very happy to be on the show, and pleasure to be the first Chinese to be interviewed by you. Your question actually really sets memories because the 40 years you describe exactly is my lifespan, right? I mean, that looking at how I grew up, I was born in Shanghai in the 80s, in 70s, and then grew up in the 80s, and saw from the very beginning, when China started the I would say the reform, the Industrial Revolution, and until today, China is completely transformed. I remember when I left China in 1990 to go to college in the U.S. The Shanghai I remember in 1990, and compared to when I went back for the first time in 1999, is completely different. Right. There are cities that just completely new. And there are, tens of millions of people now living a very different life. So transformation almost like it's going on every few years. And going back to also auto, right? I mean, think about the sector in auto. I think back in maybe in the 90s, auto was still a very small sector in China. There's probably a few million vehicle sales a year in such a big country. But after 20 years of almost uninterrupted growth, I think you can see the auto sales peaked around 25 million in China per year. So that speed and also the vast, the sheer size really give you the, capture people's imaginations. Industrial change and disruptions will due to lives, to the value chain, and to the sheer social impact as well. There's obviously a big push behind it by the government. big push by, I think, the environmental issues because the smog is a big issue in China, especially in big cities. So I think the electrification for public transportation in major cities is already a trend for a few years. Yeah. I think more and more cities now are banning traditional gas engine vehicles for public transportations. Some of the cities even go as far as the ones that the vehicle for mobility services share rides has to be also new energy vehicles. So I think that is really driving the China market transformation much faster than the rest of the world.
I just think it's fascinating because we are, I think, generally unaware. The general population in this country are unaware of the development, the speed of development, and the quality of the cars that are being built in China. And what you're doing is a really brilliant example of that. That I didn't even know about the G3. I'd not even, and I should know. I feel bad. That's my fault. I should know about that. But that's clear. You told me you sold 16,000 of those cars. So it's not like you've just started and there's 2 people have driven them. They're out in the world already.
Yeah, I think it is fascinating. We are a young company. We're about 6 years old, but we already have 2 production level car on the street. One has been sold. The first model is G3. It's a compact SUV. Right now the range per charge is 520 kilometers for this vehicle, and then we are targeting a very much a middle market focus. So the car retails around 150,000 RMB to 200,000 RMB. So roughly $20,000 to $30,000.
Right.
The product appeals to the customers in China. Not only it's a very good car, but like I said, it has one of the longest range in its class for its compact size, but also it's packed with technology. It's a technology with an ADAS, autonomous driving technology that we developed in-house. And also it has technology that we allow users to really fully appreciate all the internet features and ways of life people use. More importantly, this vehicle, actually, you don't need to touch and putting buttons and dials at all. It's all voice controlled. Right. So this is a very different experience compared to vehicles in Europe or the US.
There's been a lot of discussion around autonomous vehicles and how easy that is to adopt. But one of the key differences, I think, is if you just imagine yourself, you come out of a building and you press a button on your phone and a car pulls up in front of you and you get in it and you drive it. And then when you get out of the car at your destination, you don't park it. You get out of the car shuts down and drives itself off and parks itself. You'd go, that is good. From a consumer point of view, I'd go, that would really help me. The building I'm going to is on a busy street in a city where I can't leave a car easily. But it drops me outside there. I get out, it drives off. It doesn't try and park there. It parks in a car park. That is, a dream.
Yeah, I think that exactly goes back to the point is that we make our car and we design and research our features based on what we think will be useful and what consumer will want. Because we actually do our hardware, our software, and the autonomous driving all by ourselves. Right. So give us the flexibility of incorporate all these features and really keep thinking about how we improve, how we upgrade. Traditionally, think about it. A traditional OEM, what they do is they can see, okay, what's available out there as a tier 1 supplier, that give you the type of features in your car. That limits, the experience, limits the future upgradability, and limits the imagination of how you can constantly improve. So I think it's a totally different philosophy when you have a new company that has a very integrated R&D approach and controlling its own hardware, software, and autonomous driving, and that allows you to be a lot more consumer focused.
And so the new model you're just bringing out, it's a slightly different looking vehicle.
The second model, which we call P7, we call it a sports sedan, a longer and bigger car than the first car. You can imagine the length of the car is probably 20 centimeters longer than a Model 3, 10 centimeters shorter than the Model S. But that car is packed with the self-developed technologies we have. It has one of the best autonomous driving features in the car. we work with NVIDIA, which is our partner in the US, providing their Xavier platform, the chipset. So we actually have probably the fastest autonomous driving chipset in the world. We are the first production car for Xavier to launch globally. So that's something that we're very proud of. Our car, if you look at the range that it can achieve per charge, is over 700 kilometers.
Wow.
And I looked around. I don't think there's any production car right now sold globally that's over 700 kilometers. So it will be one of the, if not the longest, range car in its class or in EV. And also, the vehicle, as you can see, is designed very beautifully by our own in-house designer. It has a very sporty and futuristic look. And also the inside, I think we actually call it a music cockpit. It has actually very, you're from Europe, Dana Audio, right? Dana Audio is one of the premier audio. They exclusively work with us. So we designed a Dana Audio filled with 19 speakers of music cockpit. It's the electric car NVH, it's very quiet, very, very enjoyable experience inside the car. So the vehicle is, bigger car, very fast, with dual electric motors. It's 0 to 100 in about 4 seconds.
Wow.
Fast, long range, beautiful, and also with a lot of the features. We actually have the operating system on the car that's developed by ourselves as well. So you actually can, interact with you. You can use voice. It has the AI camera that look at your face, recognize you. It connect this driver to other parts of their internet life. So they connect to their Alipay program for payment. It connects to the navigation for their popular destinations, and it connects to our music provider that give them best music playlists that personalized for them. All that are account-based.
I've got a feeling you have solved this, or certainly are on the path to doing it. One of the chief problems, and I think a barrier in Europe for mass adoption of EVs, is the interaction with the car and the public charging network. That we as the human beings are the kind of grit in the wheel that we're getting, because it can be really complicated. It's getting easier, but you go to a car charger, you have to have an app, and you have to make a phone call, and you have to have an account, and you have to do and you're going, no, I just want to go ping, or the car, I want the car to know. So I plug the car in, the car talks to the charger, I pay for the electricity through the car. I mean, have you solved some of those stumbling blocks?
One of the reasons I think China is ahead of the rest of the world in EV adoption is the government is pushing really hard for the infrastructure build out on the charging side. One is that we have probably close to 1 million charging piles in China. So I think the density of charging is much higher than US and Europe, even in some of the select cities in Europe. And also China, unlike other countries or regions, mandatorily ask you for standardized plugs. So all the cars can be charged in the charging stations in China. For example, we actually developed our own proprietary charging stations. Tesla coming and charging our stations because the plugs are same, right? So we can do that vice versa. So I think that obviously is a big advantage. I know in Europe there are at least 3 standards being used, and in US I think it's all about the car maker themselves. So there are no standardized solutions. So in China, not only there's a lot of these charging stations, but also they're standardized plugs, so you can use any of those. The other I think advantage China has is, like you said, China is very used to online payment, which is a very convenient, fast payment. You just scan the code, click, and it's paid. Either it's Alipay or WeChat Pay, and people are very used to that way of life. Nobody brings credit cards or cash anymore. I don't carry a wallet on me, in my daily life. So that is also allows very smooth, very simple transaction in China.
The speed of charging. I mean, what speed can for instance, the P7? That's something I've experienced fairly recently. Is charging cars at a much higher speed than when I first had a Nissan Leaf 10 years ago. I've still got it, and that can charge, if you're lucky, at 50 kilowatts. But now I've got a car that can charge at 250 kilowatts, and it is so, you really notice it's a lot faster. And so, what speeds can the P7
Well, I think
charge at?
the car itself is designed to receive high-speed charging. So it's actually limited by the charging stations and how kilowatt, so power that they can generate connect to the power grid. So for a because we only build supercharging stations, so the super fast charging stations ourselves. So in our own charging stations, a P7 can be charged probably in an hour for a full charge. But usually we don't recommend people just to charge for full time, because I think the best, as you probably experience, you don't go down all the way to zero, right? I mean, from let's say 30% to 80%, that charge is very fast, and that's where you can get really the efficiency and bang for the buck.
Because I mean, even with the prices you've suggested to me, I mean, if you think back 8 years to build a vehicle at the quality that you have with anything like that range, you would have been talking $80,000-$90,000, not right. 20 to 30. So the price, what you've managed to create there is, in terms of a few years ago, a much cheaper and much more economically viable vehicle. Because if you can produce them at that and make a profit, that shows the world has really changed.
Yeah, I think that's why I'm really excited. When I decided to do this, is I think it will really, the stars align. I mean, the trend. I mean, it's a matter of time. I mean, the change is coming. Electrification is coming. Autonomous driving is coming. I think it's just a matter of time when we'll see the inflection point, and then the market will take off. Yeah. So I think in China, I think it probably 2 years is where I think you are starting to see going through the point. And globally, I think it'll probably take longer. But it's exciting. Think about how big industry it's going to be replaced with all these new changes, and it's a tremendous amount of value going to be created.
Brian, I mean, I could talk to you for hours. What I'm hoping is that we can do this again, and what I'm hoping even more is I can come to China and see and have a go more, because that's the last thing I did want to mention. Currently, you have no plans of selling these cars outside China. Am I correct in that, or for the time being?
Well, what I would say is that we're focused on the Chinese market right now, because it's fast growing, it has huge potential. And our car is designed for Chinese consumers, because the autonomous driving, the experience of smart, the voice and etc. But we are closely monitoring the international markets, especially some European markets, very mature. We actually want to, take a good look. Obviously, I think for us to make a big splash overseas, is probably a few years away. Yeah. But we are definitely paying a very close attention and see what we can do for some, experiment reasons.
Yeah, but I think it says a lot to, I think it's a very good educational process for people outside China to go, oh, so it's possible to make a car, because we always think of everything that you make in China, you export. But actually now your economy has reached a point where you can make cars that you only sell in China, and that's a really good business, which is, I think, something we need to adjust our thinking to understand.
Yeah, I mean, think about China is probably the largest consumer market in the world. And there's varying parts of China that resemble certain part of the world. I mean, the coastal side is very much developed. It's almost like developed countries. And then you have the inner China is still somewhat behind. So for China to go through that industrial revolution will probably take decades, right? I mean, there's first group. So you'll start to see that, even for EV product, obviously right now the big cities is where we focus ourselves on. They are the ones that has, the buyers who are more familiar with the product. The government be more encouraging adoption of EVs, and the infrastructure is much better built out. But China, from that tier 1 city to tier 2 city to tier 3, tier 4, it's almost like you're going to different countries. Yeah. So I think that allows us to have a huge market to continue to focus on. Still I think China still hasn't seen its potential yet for the EV.
But I think it's going to, and I think you'll be a big part of it. So, Brian, thank you so much for spending time with us today. It's really good to see you, and I'm very excited. One day, I will have a ride in a P7. I'm really looking forward to it.
We'll definitely hope you can be in China, and love to take you around in our P7.
Brilliant.
Let you drive.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. It was really brilliant to speak to him. If there's any news of Xpeng of the Xpeng P7 coming to Europe, I will let you know. One day, when it's possible, I really would love to go to China and see what's happening there, because it is truly remarkable. Anyway, that's all we've got time for. Please, I'm going to say it really clearly this time, please do subscribe to Fully Charged, and also Patreon. We're always incredibly grateful to our wonderful Patreon supporters. And that's it really. As always, if you have been, thank you for watching.